The day Mike Tyson taught a biker gang a lesson they'd never forget. Setting the scene. The sun hung low in the western sky, casting long golden rays across the dusty parking lot of Ruby's Diner, a small-town establishment that had weathered decades of America's changing landscape. Located just off Highway 67, the diner served as both a pit stop for weary travelers and a gathering place for locals. Today, however, the usual peaceful atmosphere had been disrupted by the arrival of the Iron Wolves, a notorious motorcycle gang that had been terrorizing the region for months. The parking lot, usually populated by a mix of pickup trucks and sedans, was now dominated by gleaming motorcycles arranged in a menacing semicircle. Their chrome finishes reflected the amber sunlight, creating an almost blinding display of mechanical intimidation. The air carried the heavy scent of motor oil, cigarette smoke, and tension. Inside the diner, nervous patrons glanced repeatedly through the windows, their meals growing cold as they watched the bikers with wary eyes. Ruby, the 60-something owner with hair as fiery as her temperament, stood behind the counter with arms crossed, her weathered face set in a grim expression. This wasn't the first time trouble had found its way to her establishment, but something about today felt different, like the calm before a devastating storm. The Iron Wolves. Griff, the self-proclaimed leader of the Iron Wolves, sat astride his motorcycle at the center of his pack. Standing at 6'3" with broad shoulders and arms covered in faded tattoos, he commanded respect through intimidation. His face, weather-beaten from years on the road, bore the scars of countless fights, badges of honor in his world. A thick, unkempt beard framed his perpetual sneer, and beneath his heavy brow, cold blue eyes assessed potential victims with predatory precision. Another dead-end town. Griff spat on the ground, his voice a gravelly rumble from years of shouting over motorcycle engines and bar fights. But at least we can have some fun while we're here. His laughter, a harsh sound devoid of genuine mirth, was echoed by his followers. Snake, Griff's right-hand man, was leaner but no less dangerous. Where Griff relied on brute strength, Snake was calculating, quick, and vicious. His nickname came not just from the serpent tattoo coiling around his neck but from his reputation for striking without warning. "Look at these locals," Snake jeered, gesturing toward a family hurrying from their car to the diner's entrance, heads down, avoiding eye contact. Scared of their own shadows. Bear, the largest member of the gang, chuckled deeply. His massive frame seemed too large for the motorcycle beneath him, but his size belied surprising agility. "Maybe we should give them something real to be scared of," he suggested, cracking his knuckles with anticipation. The remaining dozen members of the Iron Wolves, Diesel, Razor, Viper, and others known only by their road names, formed a tight-knit brotherhood bound by their rejection of society's rules. Some were ex-cons, others military veterans who couldn't readjust to civilian life, and a few were simply drawn to the freedom and power the gang lifestyle offered. For hours, they had dominated the parking lot, drinking from concealed bottles, harassing customers, and creating an atmosphere of palpable fear. The local sheriff's department, understaffed and outgunned, had adopted a policy of containment rather than confrontation when it came to the Iron Wolves. As long as they eventually moved on without causing serious harm, law enforcement kept their distance, a reality that Griff exploited at every opportunity. The arrival. As the day edged toward evening, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the parking lot, its engine purring with quiet power. The vehicle stood in stark contrast to the motorcycles, clean, expensive, and clearly belonging to someone who didn't fit the small-town profile. It moved slowly through the lot before coming to a stop in one of the few remaining spaces, coincidentally right beside the biker's formation. Well, Griff drawled, straightening up from his relaxed position. "Looks like we've got a city slicker passing through." The Iron Wolves collectively turned their attention to the SUV, their previous boredom instantly replaced by predatory interest. The air crackled with malicious anticipation as they waited to see who would emerge. When the driver's door opened, a figure stepped out that would have been instantly recognizable to millions around the world. But in this remote corner of America, surrounded by men more concerned with establishing dominance than following sports, his identity remained momentarily unknown. Mike Tyson, the former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, surveyed his surroundings with the situational awareness that had become second nature through his tumultuous life. Despite his global fame and wealth, Tyson was dressed simply in dark jeans, a fitted grey hoodie, and well-worn sneakers. His powerful physique, though older now, still carried the density and coiled strength that had made him one of the most feared fighters in boxing history. Tyson had been on the road for hours, making a cross-country journey to visit an old mentor now battling illness. The trip was personal, a chance for reflection away from the cameras and public appearances that still followed him decades after his fighting prime. When he spotted Ruby's diner, he decided to stop for a quick meal before continuing his journey, unaware of the situation he was walking into. First encounters. Tyson locked his car and pocketed the keys, his movements fluid and economical. His eyes, still sharp and observant, took in the row of motorcycles and their owners without betraying any reaction. Years in the public I had taught him how to maintain a neutral expression even when his instincts were on high alert. Griff nudged Snake, a smirk spreading across his face. "Check out this guy," he said loudly enough for Tyson to hear. "Thinks he's something special in his fancy ride." The gang members snickered, some straightening up from their lounging positions, sensing the potential for entertainment. To them, Tyson was just another outsider, another potential target to assert their dominance over. "Hey, dark chocolate," called out Diesel, a heavily tattooed man with a shaved head. "You lost? This ain't the kind of place for your type." The racial undertone wasn't subtle, and a tense silence fell over the parking lot. Even some of the gang members shifted uncomfortably, but no one challenged Diesel's words. Tyson paused, his back still to the group. The old Mike, the volatile young fighter who had responded to provocation with uncontrolled fury, might have reacted differently. But years of personal growth, spiritual practice, and hard-learned lessons had tempered his reactions. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping over the group, assessing each member with the practiced eye of someone who had faced true danger. "I'm just here for some food," Tyson said, his voice surprisingly soft but carrying a distinct lisp that was instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with boxing. "Not looking for any trouble." For a moment, there was confusion among some of the younger gang members. The voice triggered a memory, a flash of recognition. "Wait," muttered one of them, Razor, a former amateur boxer himself. "Is that?" But Griff cut him off. "Don't care who he is," he growled. "He's in our territory now." Tyson, seeing that engagement would only escalate the situation, simply nodded once and continued toward the diner's entrance. His apparent dismissal of their threat only fueled the gang's collective anger, but they held back for the moment, watching as he disappeared through the glass doors. Inside the diner. Ruby's diner was a throwback to another era, red vinyl booths, chrome-edged tables, black and white checkerboard floor, and a jukebox in the corner currently playing Creedence Clearwater Revival. The walls were adorned with vintage signs advertising everything from motor oil to soft drinks, alongside faded photographs chronicling the diner's history since its opening in 1952. The lunch rush had ended hours ago, and only a handful of patrons remained, most of them locals who had chosen to wait out the bikers rather than risk an encounter in the parking lot. Conversations hushed as Tyson entered, recognition dawning on several faces. Ruby herself was behind the counter, wiping down the surface with practiced efficiency. She looked up as the bell above the door jingled, her expression changing from wary to surprised as she recognized the famous visitor. "Well, I'll be," she said, a genuine smile breaking through her concern. "Welcome to Ruby's. Sit anywhere you'd like, hun." Tyson nodded appreciatively and chose a booth near the window where he could keep an eye on his vehicle and the bikers outside. A young waitress, her name tag reading Mandy, approached with a menu and a slightly trembling hand. "I know who you are," she said in a hushed voice, eyes wide with excitement. "My dad's your biggest fan. He has all your fight recordings." Tyson's stern expression softened. "That's nice to hear. Could I get a cheeseburger, fries, and an iced tea, please?" As Mandy hurried off to place his order, Tyson observed the gang through the window. They were now gathered around his SUV, some visibly inebriated, gesturing and laughing. One was running his hand along the vehicle's glossy surface in a way that suggested mischief rather than admiration. Inside the diner, whispers circulated among the patrons. "That's Mike Tyson. The boxer. Should someone call Sheriff Davis? Those bikers have no idea who they're messing with." An elderly gentleman in the booth behind Tyson's leaned back slightly. "Son," he said without turning around, "those wolves have been terrorizing this town for weeks. Police won't do nothing substantial. They're waiting for them to move on." Tyson acknowledged the information with a slight nod but kept his attention on his surroundings. He had no intention of engaging with the gang unless absolutely necessary. Years of therapy and spiritual guidance had taught him to channel his aggressive energy, to choose his battles wisely. But he was also acutely aware that sometimes, trouble finds you no matter how hard you try to avoid it. The confrontation begins. Tyson had just taken his first bite of the cheeseburger, which was surprisingly good, when the diner's door swung open with enough force to make the bell clatter violently. Snake sauntered in, his lean frame exuding arrogance as he scanned the room before fixing his gaze on Tyson. The atmosphere in the diner immediately tensed. Ruby moved from behind the counter, wiping her hands on her apron, ready to intervene if necessary. She had dealt with troublemakers before, but the Iron Wolves were in a different league. Snake approached Tyson's booth, sliding into the seat opposite him without invitation. The smell of cigarettes, cheap whiskey, and unwashed leather accompanied him. "So," Snake drawled, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the tabletop, "nice ride you got out there. Must have cost a pretty penny." Tyson continued eating, his movements deliberate and controlled. After swallowing, he met Snake's gaze directly. "It gets me where I need to go." Snake's lips curled into a sneer. "Thing is, you parked it right next to our bikes. And we don't much like that. Might get scratched. Accidents happen, you know?" The threat hung in the air between them. The other diners watched with bated breath, some discreetly trying to record the interaction on their phones. "I'm just passing through," Tyson replied evenly. "Having my meal, then I'll be on my way. No need for any accidents." Snake leaned forward, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "See, that's not how it works around here. You gotta pay a toll for driving through our town in your fancy car, looking down on folks like us." Ruby approached the table, coffee pot in hand though neither man had a cup. It was merely a pretext to intervene. "Everything all right here?" she asked, her tone making it clear that trouble would not be tolerated inside her establishment. Snake shot her a dark look. "Just having a friendly conversation with our out-of-town guest." "Right, friend." Tyson, recognizing Ruby's attempt to defuse the situation, nodded. "Everything's fine. Thank you." Ruby hesitated, clearly not convinced, but eventually moved away, keeping a watchful eye on the table. Snake's attention returned to Tyson. "Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna come outside with me, nice and friendly-like, and make a contribution to the Iron Wolves Travel Fund. Say, whatever cash you got on you plus that fancy watch. Then maybe, just maybe, your pretty car doesn't get redecorated with our special touch." Throughout this exchange, Tyson had maintained a calm exterior, but those familiar with his fighting days might have recognized the subtle signs of his rising anger. A slight tightening around the eyes, a controlled rhythm to his breathing, the stillness that preceded explosive movement in the ring. "I don't think that's going to happen," Tyson said quietly, his voice steady but with an underlying firmness that seemed to surprise Snake. For a moment, Snake seemed uncertain, perhaps finally registering that the man across from him wasn't displaying the fear he was accustomed to instilling. But pride and the knowledge that his gang was just outside bolstered his confidence. "Wrong answer," Snake hissed, reaching across the table to grab Tyson's shirt. With reflexes honed through thousands of hours of training, Tyson caught Snake's wrist in midair, applying just enough pressure to stop the movement without causing injury, yet. The speed of his reaction startled Snake, whose eyes widened with the first flicker of genuine concern. "Don't," Tyson said simply, releasing Snake's wrist after making his point. Snake withdrew his hand, rubbing his wrist with a mixture of anger and newfound respect. He stood abruptly, knocking against the table and causing Tyson's drink to spill. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life," Snake spat, backing toward the door. "We're gonna teach you some manners, city boy. Griff and the boys are gonna enjoy this." As Snake stormed out, Mandy rushed over with a cloth to clean up the spilled drink. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Those guys are bad news. Really bad. Maybe you should leave through the back." Tyson shook his head. "No need for that. I'll finish my meal. Is there a sheriff in town?" "Sheriff Davis," Ruby answered, approaching again. "But he's out on the county line dealing with a highway accident. Won't be back for at least an hour." Tyson nodded thoughtfully. "I see." "Mr. Tyson," Ruby said, lowering her voice, "those men have been terrorizing this town for weeks. Breaking windows, roughing up locals, scaring off tourists. Nobody stands up to them because they always travel in a pack." "I understand," Tyson replied, his expression softening slightly. "But I'm not looking for a fight. Never am these days." Ruby gave him a knowing look. "Sometimes the fight finds you, whether you're looking or not." The gathering storm. Outside, Snake's return to the group was met with eager anticipation. He quickly relayed his encounter with Tyson, embellishing slightly to mask his momentary intimidation. "Guy thinks he's tough," Snake concluded. "Refused to cooperate. Tried to grab me, but I got away." Griff's eyes narrowed. "Nobody disrespects one of us without answering to all of us," he declared, his voice carrying across the parking lot. The gang murmured in agreement, their collective identity reinforcing their individual courage. "What's the plan, Griff?" asked Viper, a younger member always eager to prove himself. Griff surveyed his assembled crew, 14 strong and fueled by alcohol, adrenaline, and the dangerous chemistry of group mentality. "We wait. He has to come out eventually. Then we teach him what happens when you come into our territory acting like you own the place." Inside the diner, Tyson continued his meal, outwardly calm but inwardly preparing for what he knew was coming. The other patrons had grown even more tense, some making discreet phone calls, others discussing whether to leave through the kitchen exit. An older man in a veteran's cap approached Tyson's table, standing at a respectful distance. "Sir," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his years, "name's Bill. Served in Vietnam. Just wanted to say I've been watching those fellas out there. They're riled up, looking for blood. There's 14 of them by my count." Tyson nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Bill. I counted the same." Bill hesitated, then added, "I know who you are, what you can do. But even for Mike Tyson, 14-1 odds ain't good. My truck's out back. Happy to give you a ride out. Avoid this whole mess." The offer was genuine, and Tyson considered it briefly. But something in him, perhaps the same spirit that had carried him from the troubled streets of Brownsville, Brooklyn, to becoming the youngest heavyweight champion in history, rebelled against the idea of skulking away. "I appreciate that, Bill. Really do. But I can't spend my life running from bullies. Never have, never will." Bill studied him for a moment, then gave a single, understanding nod. "Figured you'd say that. Well, just so you know, not everyone in this town's afraid to stand up. If things go sideways out there, you won't be alone." With that cryptic statement, Bill returned to his table where 3 other elderly men sat, all with the bearing of former military. They exchanged quiet words, occasionally glancing toward Tyson with expressions of grim determination. Tyson finished his meal and left a generous tip. As he stood, the entire diner seemed to hold its breath. Ruby approached him one last time. "Whatever happens out there," she said quietly, "just know this town's behind you. Those wolves have had their run. Maybe it's time someone showed them there are still some shepherds in the world." Tyson smiled slightly. "I'm no shepherd. Just a man trying to get where I'm going." "Sometimes," Ruby replied with wisdom born of years watching the human drama unfold in her diner, "the journey makes you what you need to be, whether you planned it or not." With those words hanging in the air, Tyson walked toward the entrance, his stride purposeful and unhurried. Through the glass, He could see the gang had positioned themselves in a loose semicircle facing the door, an unmistakable gauntlet he would have to pass through to reach his vehicle. The storm breaks. The moment Tyson pushed open the diner door, the evening air hit him with a wall of tension. The gang had arranged themselves strategically, Griff at the center with Snake and Bear flanking him, the others spread out to prevent any easy escape. The parking lot had cleared of other vehicles as word spread about the impending confrontation, creating an impromptu arena for what was to come. "Well, look who finally decided to join us," Griff called out, his voice carrying across the now silent parking lot. "Thought you might try to sneak out the back." Tyson stood on the diner's steps, taking in the situation with the tactical assessment of a fighter who had faced countless opponents. His eyes moved methodically from one gang member to the next, noting postures, placements, potential weapons. "Just want to get to my car," Tyson stated plainly, beginning to descend the steps. "No interest in whatever game you're playing." Griff's laughter was joined by the others, a chorus of mockery. "Hear that, boys? He's not interested in our games." His expression hardened suddenly. "Too bad. You became a player the moment you disrespected Snake." Tyson continued walking forward, his path taking him directly toward Griff. Some of the gang members shifted nervously, intimidated by his confidence despite being outnumbered. "Listen," Tyson said, stopping a few feet from Griff. "I don't know you. You don't know me. Let's keep it that way. I get in my car, leave town, and we all go about our business." Griff stepped closer, using his height advantage to look down at Tyson. "Here's the thing, tough guy. This is our town. Everyone in it pays their respects to the Iron Wolves one way or another. You parked that fancy SUV here, you pay the toll." Behind Tyson, the diner door opened again, and Bill emerged with his three companions. They positioned themselves on the steps, watching intently but not interfering. From other businesses along the street, more townspeople appeared, drawn by the word-of-mouth news that someone was finally standing up to the Iron Wolves. Griff noticed the gathering crowd and smirked. "Look at that, boys. Town's come out to watch us teach this outsider a lesson." He turned back to Tyson. "Empty your pockets. Watch, wallet, keys. Now." Tyson remained still, his hands at his sides. "No." The simple refusal hung in the air like a challenge. Griff's face darkened with rage at being defied publicly. "Wrong answer," he growled, nodding to Bear and Diesel. The two largest gang members moved forward simultaneously, Bear reaching for Tyson's arm while Diesel approached from the other side. What happened next would later be described by witnesses as like watching lightning strike twice in the same spot. Tyson's years of training took over. With explosive speed that belied his age, he stepped inside Bear's reach, delivering a short, devastating body hook that folded the large man like a collapsing building. Before Bear even hit the ground, Tyson had pivoted, ducking under Diesel's wild swing and countering with a right cross that connected with surgical precision to Diesel's jaw. Diesel's eyes rolled back as he crumpled unconscious. The entire exchange had taken less than 3 seconds. A stunned silence fell over the parking lot. Two of the Iron Wolves' most imposing members lay on the asphalt, one gasping for breath, the other completely still. The remaining gang members looked to Griff, their earlier bravado visibly shaken. Griff's shock quickly transformed into fury. "Get him," he bellowed, reaching behind his back and pulling out a heavy chain. The remaining gang members rushed forward in a chaotic wave. Tyson, now fully engaged in the fighting mindset that had made him a champion, moved with the fluid precision of a master. Each punch he threw connected with devastating effect, each defensive movement flowing seamlessly into a counterattack. 2 more gang members went down in quick succession. Razor caught by an uppercut that lifted him off his feet, and Viper folded by a liver shot that left him retching on the ground. The others, realizing too late that they had provoked a genuine predator, attacked with increasing desperation. Snake, displaying the cunning that earned him his nickname, circled behind and attempted to trap Tyson in a chokehold. With decades of training against such tactics, Tyson dropped his center of gravity, hooked Snake's leg, and sent him sprawling. A quick, precise strike to Snake's solar plexus ensured he stayed down, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Throughout the melee, Tyson maintained an eerie composure, his breathing controlled, his movements economical yet devastatingly effective. This wasn't the wild, berserker Tyson of his early career but a disciplined fighter using only the force necessary to neutralize each threat. Griff, seeing his crew being systematically dismantled, swung his chain in a vicious arc aimed at Tyson's head. With reflexes honed through countless hours facing opponents trying to separate him from consciousness, Tyson slipped the attack, the chain whistling harmlessly past his ear. Before Griff could recover from his missed swing, Tyson closed the distance, delivering a series of punishing body blows that drove the air from the gang leader's lungs. A final right hook sent Griff staggering backward, blood streaming from his nose, the chain falling from his nerveless fingers. The remaining gang members, witnessing their leader's defeat, backed away uncertainly. Some helped their fallen comrades to their feet, while others simply fled to their motorcycles, suddenly eager to be anywhere else. Griff, bent over and supporting himself with hands on knees, spat blood onto the asphalt. "This isn't over," he gasped, his threat undermined by his obvious physical distress. Tyson stood amidst the downed gang members, his hoodie barely disturbed, his breathing only slightly elevated. "It is over," he stated with quiet authority. "You and your friends get on your bikes and leave this town. Don't come back." A new sound cut through the tense aftermath, police sirens wailing in the distance, growing louder by the second. Someone had finally reached Sheriff Davis, who was now racing back to town. Justice served. Sheriff Davis's cruiser skidded into the parking lot, lights flashing and siren cutting off mid-wail. The stocky, gray-haired lawman emerged with his hand resting cautiously on his holstered weapon, taking in the scene before him. Injured bikers scattered across the asphalt, a gathering crowd of townspeople, and Mike Tyson standing calmly in the center of it all. "What in God's name happened here?" the sheriff demanded, approaching cautiously. Bill stepped forward from the crowd. "These Iron Wolves boys tried to rob and assault Mr. Tyson here. He defended himself." Several other witnesses nodded in agreement, some holding up phones indicating they had video evidence. Ruby emerged from the diner, adding her authoritative voice to the chorus. "They've been terrorizing my customers for weeks, Sheriff. Today they picked on the wrong man." Sheriff Davis looked from the subdued gang members to Tyson, recognition finally dawning in his eyes. "You're Mike Tyson." Tyson nodded. "Just passing through, Sheriff. Had no choice but to defend myself." The sheriff assessed the situation with the practiced eye of a veteran law enforcement officer. The Iron Wolves had been a thorn in his side for too long, but his undermanned department had struggled to build a case strong enough to rid the town of them permanently. "Well," he said finally, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. "Looks like we've got multiple witnesses to attempted robbery, assault, and I'm guessing," he looked pointedly at the chain Griff had dropped, "assault with a deadly weapon. Not to mention all the outstanding warrants some of these boys probably have." 2 deputy cruisers pulled into the lot, reinforcements finally arriving. Sheriff Davis turned to them, issuing crisp orders to secure the scene and begin taking statements from witnesses. Griff, now handcuffed and seated on the curb with several of his cohorts, glared venomously at Tyson. "You have no idea who you're messing with," he threatened. "The Iron Wolves have chapters all over. This ain't over." Sheriff Davis overheard the threat and crouched down to Griff's eye level. "Actually, son, I think it is over. With the witness statements and video evidence, you're looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. Your brothers from other chapters won't be visiting much where you're going." As the deputies began processing the gang members and loading them into patrol cars, Sheriff Davis approached Tyson, extending his hand. "Mr. Tyson, on behalf of our town, I want to thank you. These wolves have been at our door for too long." Tyson shook the offered hand. "Just wanted a cheeseburger and some peace, Sheriff." Davis chuckled. "Well, you got half of what you came for, at least. If you're still planning to move on tonight, I'd be happy to escort you to the county line. Make sure you don't have any more unwelcome encounters." "Appreciate that, Sheriff." As Tyson prepared to leave, the townspeople gathered around him, many wanting to shake his hand or express their gratitude. Ruby pushed through the crowd, pressing a paper bag into his hands. Apple pie, she explained with a warm smile. Best in the county. For the road. Tyson accepted the gift with genuine appreciation. Thank you. You've got a good town here. Worth protecting. Bill and his fellow veterans offered crisp salutes, which Tyson acknowledged with a respectful nod. Even in this unexpected situation, he recognized the mutual respect of those who had faced their own battles. As he climbed into his SUV, followed by Sheriff Davis's cruiser, the gathered townspeople erupted into applause and cheers. It wasn't just gratitude for dealing with the Iron Wolves, it was recognition of someone who embodied the qualities they valued. Standing up for what's right, protecting the vulnerable, and facing down bullies with courage. Reflection and legacy. Miles down the highway, with Sheriff Davis's cruiser now turned back toward town, Tyson drove in thoughtful silence. The encounter had stirred something in him, memories of his younger self, the anger that had both fueled his rise and contributed to his fall. But today had been different. He had fought not out of rage or pride but out of necessity, with control and purpose. There was a certain peace in that realization, a sign of how far he had come on his personal journey. As the small town faded in his rearview mirror, Tyson couldn't help but smile slightly. Sometimes life brings you full circle, he thought. From a kid fighting bullies on Brooklyn streets to a middle-aged man doing the same on a small-town parking lot. The stakes change, but the core remains the same. Standing up for yourself, doing what's right, finding the balance between power and restraint. The news of what happened that day spread quickly through the region. Cell phone videos of the confrontation went viral, adding another chapter to the Tyson legend. More importantly, the Iron Wolves' reign of terror in the area came to an abrupt end as their leadership faced serious criminal charges backed by abundant evidence. For the residents of that small town, the day Mike Tyson stopped for a cheeseburger became local legend. A reminder that sometimes heroes appear when and where you least expect them, that standing up to bullies requires courage but reaps rewards, and that within each of us lies the potential for both destructive and protective power. The choice of how to use that power makes all the difference.